For more on Apple, let's head back to Cupertino with Loup Ventures founder Gene Munster. Gene, you were in the event, I believe, today. So what's your takeaway tonight?
Scott, really two takeaways. First, the financial impact. If you put these four services together and think about what it could add in the next 5 years, I think about $1 billion or 20 billion or so in revenue. So that probably equates to about 10% in annual services growth for the next 5 years. And we can break down about where we get that 20 billion. But that's the financial impact. And then I think there's a higher level order that Apple is shooting for here today that gets lost in these announcements that have been largely anticipated. And whether or not the consumers want this remains to be seen. But effectively what Apple is saying is they're going to take things that we interact with every day, whether it's a streaming service, gaming, or our credit card, and we're going to try to change in terms of how people use that. The language that they use is enriching people's lives. And I recognize that when I use that language, it makes me feel like I'm just repeating what their message is here, but I think it is an important distinction. They're trying to create content that isn't about the typical content that we've seen, this enriched lives content, gaming that's more healthy gaming, and I think this is the first time a credit card can actually add transparency, and that gets lost in the conversation today. These subtle little approaches that Apple does to make our lives just a little bit better, and I think that ultimately is going to yield a higher share price. So I'm very much encouraged by the announcements today.
So you think it takes the services business to the next level, so to speak?
Yeah, definitely on the video side, on the credit card, what they're doing is something that I think other credit card companies must be scrambling right now to try to add that layer of transparency, really shifting the focus from making money as a credit card issuer to try to Apple's not going to make a ton of money off the credit card. I just want to be also clear about that. I think this in 5 years can be, call it $1.5 billion business, much smaller than the $15 billion. But the interesting part, just to go one more level deeper on the credit card here, that the exciting part about that is that if you look at the other announcements today, there are variations, I think, to a better degree than we've seen before. But the credit card, that actually was a measurable step forward. That's something that I think most people really don't think about how they use their credit card. And I think that that is a good example of what an advantage that Apple has of obviously tying together the hardware, the software, and the services.
So, Gene, when you look at the investment that they're putting in and trying to become a competitor of Netflix, were you underwhelmed by the amount of investment? Should that investment be 10x, or is it a fact, to your point, that it's 4 services, so they're trying to focus on all of them and not just one of them, and they're more of an aggregator versus a direct competitor to so many of the services that they're offering?
Well, I think they wanted to try to bundle all these service announcements together. This is a logical time of the year to do that. But unfortunately, when you do that, you have to pre-announce things and we don't have a lot of details. So let's talk about the video real quickly, is that it's unclear how many shows and movies they have. Most likely it's probably around 40, which is a far cry from Netflix at 1,000 original series. But I think the quality of this is what is going to ultimately stand out. And I suspect the way that Apple is going to measure their success is the number of industry awards. I don't know enough about entertainment and what the proper awards that they are going to gun for here. But at the end of the day, I think that this content, this different approach, is going to have an impact. And I think that that could be a similar size business as Netflix, call it $15 billion a year. I am in the camp that this will have a negative impact on Netflix stock over the next year.
How do you judge the stock today, given the fact that it had such a big run into the announcements?
I think it's a great example of how these Apple events set up, is that we generally know what's happening going into it, but the significance of what's announced really doesn't become more clear to us until quarters and years ahead. And I think I judge the significance is Apple's making a statement. They're going after services, but they're also taking a different approach to services. That different approach is enriching lives, and more healthy game content, more transparency around credit. So I view this as a positive. It's in line with Apple's brand. They mentioned security, if you're interested. If you were playing buzzword bingo 7 times they are heavy on that theme as well, which I think is something unique that Apple can add to these services.
This must take a deal for a content company off the table.
Pardon me, what would it take to get I missed that.
I'm saying that like these kind of announcements that they made today would take a deal for any kind of content company by Apple just off the table.
I think largely you're right, because I think what it shows is they want to do something different.
They
like
do
if
it
they would acquire,
themselves.
I don't think they're going to acquire Netflix. CBS, they're going to acquire some type of content that's not consistent with this enriching people's lives. They would have to kill a lot of the content.
Yeah.
And so
Gene,
I think it largely does take that off the table.
Yeah. Gene, thanks. Good to talk to you, as always. Guy.
Thank you, Scott.
Well, again, Gene nails it all the time, but what I'll say is this. Again, 50% retracement where we closed today off the all-time high to the recent low. The 50-day moving average by or large comes in around 175. I think out of benign tape, it's reasonable to think that before earnings on April 30th, Apple retests that 175 level.
Yeah, I think they really missed the mark as far as the video content enriching lives. That's not why people have Netflix and chill. And the other point about original content, Netflix's original content is less than 8% of their viewable hours here.
They're an aggregator.
Apple is so far away from this. So the idea of having Oprah TV on Apple TV is not going to be the reason why the ecosystem uses their service. So this is going to be a dud for a bit.